Eudaimanya, systems and frameworks to improve habits, mind, and life.
Welcome to Eudaimanya, Make It Stick, by Peter C. Brown, Henry L. Roediger III, and Mark A. McDaniel. So picture this scenario for a second.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
It's late at night. You are prepping for a massive meeting or, maybe a high-stakes certification exam. You've got a cup of coffee. You are rereading your notes for like the third time, and everything just feels incredibly smooth.
Oh yeah, you're in the zone.
Right. The text flows. The concepts make total sense. You feel this rising sense of just absolute security. You are completely ready to crush this.
Yeah, you feel bulletproof.
Exactly. Yet the next day, right when it actually matters, you sit down, someone asks you a question, and you completely blank.
It is such a brutal feeling. I mean, it's just awful, but it's also entirely universal because our brains are fundamentally wiring us to fall for it.
And that is the wildest thing about the book we're diving into today. It
Yeah.
essentially tells us that warm, fuzzy feeling of knowing your notes inside and out. It's a biological trap.
It really is.
The ease of studying you felt the night before is actually a giant red flag, not a sign of progress. So today, we are going to explore why our entire pedagogical intuition about fluency, that comfortable feeling of things flowing easily, is just dead wrong.
Yeah, so when you repeatedly read a text, your brain is building what the authors call momentary strength.
Momentary strength.
Right. The information is basically just temporarily hovering in your short-term working memory, but you haven't done the actual neurological heavy lifting required to transfer it into long-term storage.
Which is the only thing that actually matters.
Exactly. Long-term storage is the only thing that builds durable habit strength.
Okay, so learning something easily is basically like writing your name in the wet sand at the beach. I mean, it's perfectly clear today, but tomorrow the tide washes it completely away.
That's a perfect way to look at it. Momentary strength gives us this massive false sense of security.
But how does that actually happen? Like, why does my brain actively betray me into thinking I'm ready?
Well, it comes down to a breakdown in what psychologists call metacognitive calibration.
Metacognitive calibration. That sounds intense.
It does, but metacognition is really just a fancy term for your awareness of your own understanding. It's knowing what you know, and maybe more importantly, knowing what you don't know.
Okay, that makes sense.
So when you reread a chapter, your brain becomes highly familiar with the author's syntax. It remembers the visual layout of the page, where the bold words are, things like that.
Oh, like when you know the answers on the bottom left of the right page, but you can't remember what it actually says.
Yes, exactly. Your brain falsely interprets that superficial visual and linguistic familiarity as a deep conceptual mastery of the actual ideas.
Wait, so just because the words themselves are physically easy for my eyes to process the third time around, my brain tricks me into thinking I actually know how to apply those underlying concepts in the real world.
Yeah, it completely tricks you. The book highlights a devastatingly common example of this.
Oh, the psychology student, right.
Yeah, consider this really diligent psychology student. She highlights her notes in perfect color coordination. She rereads the textbook until she can practically recite the paragraphs word for word.
She basically feels like the model student.
Totally. Then she takes the midterm and she gets a D.
Yeah, wow.
And she is genuinely devastated. I mean, she thinks she's just not smart enough. But the book argues her intelligence wasn't the issue at all. Her metacognitive calibration was just completely broken.
Because she mistook perceptual fluency, like the physical ease of reading the words, for conceptual mastery.
Exactly. She thought fluency meant mastery.
That hits so painfully close to home for anyone who has ever bombed a test they thought they aced. It's almost like mistaking your ability to recognize a song on the radio with the ability to actually play it on the guitar yourself.
Oh, that's a great analogy. Recognizing a song is easy. Playing it is a whole different ballgame.
Right. So if that feeling of fluency is a trap, we basically have to deliberately break it. In this work, the authors argue that to genuinely learn, we must introduce desirable difficulties.
Yeah, desirable difficulties. We have to inject intentional friction into the learning process.
Friction. So making it harder on purpose.
Right. Cognitive effort, like the actual, sometimes painful struggle to recall something, that triggers neuronal reconsolidation.
Neuronal reconsolidation.
Yeah, that is the physical mechanism in the brain that actually stabilizes and thickens your memory traces.
Okay, so if feeling sure of ourselves is just a perceptual illusion, how do we guarantee we actually know something?
Well, we have to completely reframe our relationship with testing.
Which is tough because usually a test is viewed as like a dipstick. You just dip it in to measure the fluid level in the tank to see what's there.
Right, but the book poses this massive human question. Why doesn't feeling sure of something mean we've actually mastered it?
Yeah, why are we so bad at judging that?
The authors explain this through our profound illusions of knowing. It ties heavily into the well-known Dunning-Kruger effect, where people just lack the competence to recognize their own competence.
Right, the less you know, the more confident you are.
Yeah. Exactly. But it's not just novices. Even for highly intelligent, highly competent people, the mechanism at play here is System 1 thinking.
That's our fast, intuitive, automatic brain, right?
Yes. System 1 constantly tricks us into assuming that mere exposure to something is the exact same thing as understanding it.
Oh, I see. Just because I am physically around something all the time, my fast-thinking brain assumes I intimately know how it works.
Exactly.
I mean, let me be totally honest here. If you ask me right now to draw the front of a standard U.S. penny from memory, like which way is Lincoln facing, what exact words are on it, I would completely fail.
Well, you definitely wouldn't be alone in that. The book details a brilliant study proving exactly that point.
Really? With pennies?
Yeah, researchers asked people to identify the correct image of a real penny from a lineup of slightly altered, fake pennies.
And people couldn't do it?
Mostly, no. Despite having seen, touched, and handled literally thousands of pennies throughout their entire lives, most people completely failed to pick the real one.
That is wild. But it makes sense, because mere exposure does not equal learning.
Nope, not at all.
There's another crazy anecdote in the book about this professor at UCLA. So this guy couldn't locate the fire extinguisher right outside his own office door.
Oh, yeah, that one is fascinating.
Right. He had 25 years of daily exposure to it. He walked past this bright red cylinder every single morning for decades. But when a colleague asked where it was, he drew a total blank.
It perfectly illustrates why relying on our gut feeling of, oh, yeah, I know this, is just a guaranteed path to failure.
So what's the fix?
The authors argue that we need objective instruments to calibrate our judgment. We have to actively force ourselves to retrieve information to expose the gaps in our knowledge.
Which completely changes how we should view exams. I mean, we all hate tests. They cause anxiety. We try to avoid them.
Sure, nobody likes taking a test.
But the book says examining yourself helps infinitely more than just reviewing your notes.
Yes. The authors call this the testing effect, or retrieval practice. When you force your brain to actually dig up information from memory, you actively interrupt the biological process of forgetting.
Let's talk about the mechanics of that, because the book uses an analogy I seriously cannot stop thinking about. If we start viewing a test as a dipstick measuring fluid, what is it?
It's the knot at the end of the string.
Yes. The authors describe retrieval as the knot at the end of a string of cranberries. If you are making a cranberry garland and you don't tie a knot at the end of the string, you can slide berries on all day, but they're just going to slip right off the other end.
They just fall right off into the void.
Exactly. Testing yourself is tying the knot.
And the neurological equivalent of tying that knot is reconsolidation. When you pull a piece of knowledge out of long-term memory, that neural trace becomes pliable again.
Pliable, like melting wax or something.
Yeah, exactly like melting wax. The brain is forced to reconsolidate the memory, carving a much deeper groove. Furthermore, the sheer effort of searching for the memory multiplies the neural routes, the pathways your brain can use to access that information later.
So the struggle to find the memory is actually building roads to it.
Precisely. The act of checking the memory physically alters the brain to strengthen that exact memory.
It literally changes the brain's architecture.
Yeah.
And the results are just staggering. I mean, the book details a study from a middle school in Columbia, Illinois.
The social studies one.
Yeah, 6th grade social studies students. The researchers had the teachers give regular low-stakes quizzes on just a portion of the course material. The quizzes didn't even count toward their final grade. They were strictly just for practice.
Just retrieval practice.
Right. And a month later, the students took a major exam on everything. They scored an A- on the specific material they had been quizzed on, but only a C+ on the material they had repeatedly reviewed without quizzes. Just the act of answering practice questions bumped them up almost 2 full letter grades.
A 2-letter grade jump from simply changing how they interacted with the material. But, this brings up a really crucial nuance about when this friction is actually productive.
Oh, right, the timing of it.
Yeah, timing matters immensely.
Because if I read a page of a textbook, close my eyes, and immediately quiz myself like 10 seconds later, I'm just relying on that momentary short-term strength again, right?
Exactly. You haven't tied the knot yet.
Which leads us to the super counterintuitive idea that forgetting a little bit before you review actually strengthens your memory.
Yes. The authors refer to this as spaced practice. The central biological mechanism here is that the harder your brain has to work to recall the information, provided you haven't totally lost it, of course, the deeper and more permanent the subsequent reconsolidation will be.
So, to stick with our earlier analogy, you have to let the wet sand dry out a bit before you grab a chisel and carve the memory in permanently.
That is a great way to put it. When you space out your practice sessions over days or weeks, the information naturally fades from your short-term working memory.
It's a little blurry.
Right. So when you finally sit down to quiz yourself, your brain cannot rely on those easy, superficial pathways. It is forced to literally reload the entire concept from long-term storage.
And it's the physiological effort of that reload that builds the muscle. There's a fantastic example in the book featuring Dr. Mike Ebersold, a neurosurgeon.
Oh, his routine is incredible.
Because when you're dealing with brain surgery, you absolutely cannot afford to have a memory slip.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Ebersold doesn't just physically practice surgical techniques in the operating room. He utilizes spaced retrieval.
Yeah, he does it all mentally.
He mentally rehearses and intensely reflects on incredibly difficult procedures, like, say, a highly complex vascular repair technique using muscle plugs on a ruptured vein. But he does it hours or even days after he has left the hospital.
And that delay is the key. By intentionally waiting hours or days, Dr. Ebersold lets the memory of the physical movements and the anatomical structures recede slightly. It gets a little fuzzy, just like we talked about.
Right.
So when he forces himself to mentally walk through the surgical steps again in his living room, the struggle to visualize it triggers a massive reconsolidation of that knowledge.
He's carving that groove deeper.
Exactly. The practical consequence here is that you must allow your grasp on a topic to weaken just enough so that retrieving it actually feels like a workout.
That completely reframes the feeling of struggling to remember something. I mean, usually we panic when we can't instantly recall a fact. We think, oh no, my memory is failing.
Right, we see struggle as failure.
But the book argues that struggle is the very mechanism of learning. But it goes even further to disrupt how we study. It's not just when we test ourselves, it's what we test.
Yeah, interleaving.
Right. Why does mixing completely different topics together teach us more than mastering just one topic at a time?
This is the concept of interleaved practice, and it directly combats our natural instinct to block our study time.
Block our study time.
Yeah, blocking is when we study a single topic until we achieve flawless execution, and then we move to the next.
Like doing 20 division problems and then 20 multiplication problems.
Exactly. Interleaved practice forces you to scramble them all up. The mechanism at work here is that interleaving forces the brain into active discrimination and induction.
Okay, let's break that down for a second, because active discrimination and induction sounds like some heavy textbook jargon.
Fair enough.
So discrimination basically means the brain has to figure out which type of problem it is currently looking at, right?
Right.
And induction means what exactly in this context?
Induction is the brain's ability to extract an underlying rule or pattern from a series of totally different examples.
Oh, no, okay.
When you block your practice doing that same math formula 20 times in a row, your brain just goes on autopilot. It stops analyzing the problem and just executes a repetitive motor schema.
Because it already knows what tool to use.
Exactly. But when you interleave, the brain is constantly kept off balance. It has to analyze the specific features of each new problem to determine which rule applies. It builds highly versatile mental models that can actually adapt to unpredictable real-world situations.
I have to bring up the Cal Poly baseball team example from the book here, because it makes this physical mechanism crystal clear.
Oh, the batting practice study.
Yes. Imagine a team of highly skilled collegiate hitters trying to improve their batting against curveballs. The researchers split them into two groups. Group 1 gets masked or blocked practice.
So they know what's coming.
Right. They stand at the plate, and the pitching machine throws 15 curveballs in a row. By the 10th pitch, their muscles have completely calibrated to the exact trajectory, and they are just crushing the ball into the bleachers. It looks incredibly impressive.
But as the authors point out, it is completely artificial. In a real game, you never face 15 curveballs in a row.
Exactly. It's an illusion of confidence. Now, Group 2 gets interleaved practice. The pitching machine throws a totally random, unpredictable sequence. Fastball, slider, curveball, changeup, curveball.
And how do they do?
During practice, this group looks terrible. They are swinging wildly, they are striking out, they are clearly frustrated. It feels incredibly slow and demoralizing.
Right, because they aren't just calibrating muscle memory to a single trajectory anymore. They are being forced to practice active discrimination.
Yes. They have to watch the pitcher's shoulder, the elbow angle, the release point on every single pitch just to identify what the ball is going to do before it crosses the plate.
Which is the actual skill you need.
That is the actual real-world skill required in a live baseball game. So when they finally measured game performance, the interleaved group, the ones who looked terrible in practice, vastly outperformed the massed practice group.
It's amazing.
If we want long-term mastery, we have to practice dynamically. We have to accept that we're going to look and feel clumsy during the learning process.
But you know, that dynamic adaptability leads us to a really fascinating and deeply counterintuitive problem.
What's that?
Well, interleaving builds these incredibly versatile mental models, right? But what happens when someone becomes an absolute master at utilizing those models? Why does a true expert often do a terrible job of explaining the very thing they have mastered?
Oh man, I've lived this. Trying to teach an older relative how to use a new smartphone, I end up practically tearing my hair out because they don't understand things that feel painfully obvious to me.
Yeah, the book actually has a name for that. They call it the curse of knowledge.
The curse of knowledge. That sounds ominous.
Well, when someone reaches the highest levels of expertise, their brain physically processes the information differently than a novice's brain does.
How so?
Through neuroplasticity and years of habit formation, experts actually chunk complex sequences of cognitive steps into single, massive macro mental models.
Kind of like writing a macro in a spreadsheet that executes 20 steps with one single click.
Exactly like that. And these chunked models are relocated deep into the basal ganglia of the brain.
The basal ganglia.
Yeah, which is essentially the brain's autopilot center. It handles automatic subconscious actions like how you can drive your car all the way home from work and suddenly realize you don't actually remember the trip.
Oh, highway hypnosis.
Right. Because the expert's process is now handled by the basal ganglia automatically, they literally lose conscious access to the underlying granular, step-by-step logic that a novice desperately needs.
Wow. It's like asking an adult to explain the exact physics of how they balance on a bicycle. They don't think about the micro adjustments of their core muscles or the equilibrium fluid in their inner ear. They just ride the bike.
Exactly. The book uses Harvard physics professor Eric Mazur as a perfect case study for this.
What happened with him?
So Mazur is an incredibly brilliant physicist, but he had this really sobering moment of realization when he discovered his introductory physics students simply could not follow his lectures.
Were they just not paying attention?
No, they were trying. But when he solved an equation on the board, he was casually skipping foundational algebraic steps because those steps had just become second nature to his brain.
Ah, the macro clicks.
Right. To his expert mind, step 1 naturally and obviously jumps to step 5, but the students are sitting there panicking, wondering what on earth happened to steps 2, 3, and 4.
This perfectly explains why traditional fire hose college lectures fail so often. The expert is blasting dense information based on their own highly chunked mental models, completely oblivious to the fact that the students don't have the neurological architecture to catch it yet.
Exactly.
So if we are the student in that scenario, how do we defend against an expert's curse of knowledge? The book suggests a countermeasure, right? Called generative learning.
Yeah, generative learning, it basically flips the traditional sequence. Instead of waiting to be taught the solution, you attempt to solve the problem before you have the necessary knowledge.
Wait, really? It's like someone asking you to guess the capital of Texas before they tell you it's Austin. As you rummage around in your brain, like, is it Dallas? Houston? San Antonio? You are actively generating a state of curiosity.
You're priming your neural networks.
Right.
You are basically digging the hole before you plant the tree. That wrestling process, even when you inevitably arrive at the wrong answer, prepares the cognitive soil. It makes the mind highly receptive.
So when the expert finally reveals the correct answer, it takes root immediately rather than just washing over you.
Exactly.
Okay, so the entire architecture of Make It Stick relies on this core engine of desirable difficulty. Retrieval practice, spacing, interleaving, generation, they all require us to embrace friction.
They do.
But let's step outside the mechanics for a minute and stress test the system itself. Is all difficulty good? Are there limits to this?
Oh, absolutely. That is a critical boundary line we have to draw. The book explicitly states that difficulties are only desirable if the learner already possesses the foundational base knowledge required to actually overcome them.
So you need a fighting chance.
Right. If the friction is mathematically or linguistically impossible to overcome, it ceases to be productive. It just becomes an undesirable difficulty.
Got it. I mean, I can't just pick up a textbook written in Lithuanian and expect my brain to undergo neuronal reconsolidation. I don't speak a single word of Lithuanian.
No, you'd just be staring at the page.
Right. The difficulty is immense, but it's completely undesirable because I'm just staring at meaningless shapes. There's a zero chance for cognitive growth there.
Exactly. And another major boundary involves spaced practice.
How so?
Well, we established that spacing out your reviews forces a deep cognitive reload, right?
Right.
But if you space your practice out so far that you have completely and utterly forgotten the material, you are no longer retrieving a memory. You are just starting from scratch.
Oh, that makes sense. You let the string slip all the way out of the bead.
Exactly. The difficulty must be carefully calibrated. It has to be just out of reach, forcing you to stretch your cognitive muscles, but not so far away that you tear a ligament, so to speak.
It really requires a massive shift in how we perceive our own struggles. If we look at the broader psychological context, this entire system of learning fundamentally relies on Carol Dweck's concept of the growth mindset, doesn't it?
It is entirely dependent on it, yes. Think about the reality of what the authors are asking you to do here.
It's hard.
It is. Spaced and interleaved practice feels intensely frustrating. It feels clumsy. You are going to get things wrong repeatedly. If a person operates with a fixed mindset, the belief that intelligence is just a static innate trait you are born with, they will interpret this friction as a personal failure.
Like the baseball players.
Yeah.
They will strike out against the random pitches in practice, throw their bat, think, I'm just not a good hitter, and walk away from the sport.
Precisely. The system only functions if you inherently believe that your intelligence is malleable.
You have to trust the process.
Yeah. The physical reality of neuroplasticity demands a psychological framework that can actually tolerate the discomfort of making errors. You have to view a mistake not as a permanent lack of ability, but as a necessary biological signal of effort.
But I have to push back here on the reality of actually implementing this, because it completely shatters how we are culturally conditioned from childhood.
Oh, it goes against everything we're taught.
Right. We are raised entirely on B.F. Skinner's behavioral concept of errorless learning. From the time we are in kindergarten, mistakes are punished with red ink and bad grades.
Yeah, get it right the first time or you fail.
Exactly. Our whole educational system is designed to reward absolute fluency on a test and penalize any friction. And now this book is proving that the very act of making mistakes and correcting them is the literal bridge to advanced durable learning.
It is a massive paradigm shift. Our educational culture incentivizes the illusion of fluency. It falsely signals to students that if they are struggling, they must be failing.
Which is tragic, really.
It is, because cognitive science unequivocally shows that struggle is the engine of memory consolidation. We have to actively unlearn how we were taught to learn.
We have to completely rewire our expectations.
Yeah, we have to sacrifice that warm, fuzzy feeling of immediate competence for the rugged, durable reality of desirable difficulties.
Let's bring all this together for everyone listening. We started by picturing that late night, staring at your notes, feeling like you have achieved total mastery just because the words slide easily across your vision.
The wet sand.
The wet sand. We now know that ease is your worst enemy. It is just writing in the sand. To truly learn, you have to embrace the friction. You have to test yourself until it hurts a little.
Tie the knot on the cranberries.
Right. You have to mix up your practice, space it out over time, and wrestle with problems before you're even handed the answers.
You have to accept that genuine learning is an active, structural remodeling of your brain, not just a passive absorption of facts.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to carry into your next deep work session, or really just the next time you sit down to study. If cognitive science proves that the method that actually works best is the one that feels the absolute worst while you are practicing it, how much of your internal voice saying, I'm just not good at this, is actually just the normal, necessary sensation of truly learning?
If this video was useful, give it a like, subscribe, and share. More systems and frameworks in the next Eudaimanya video.